Okay. Is that a little better? Can you hear? Okay. Very good. So yes, the theme of tonight's talk is what does it take to reach enlightenment? What does it take to reach enlightenment? Firstly, it takes a lot of suffering, right? Through countless lives. Over and over and over again, we've been reborn. We've had a little bit of pleasure. We've had a lot more suffering. If our lives were purely pleasurable, with no suffering at all, we would be very happy to keep on being reborn over and over again, right? If our lives were exclusively suffering, we wouldn't have the opportunity to experience the conditions that lead to enlightenment. We would be stuck in that suffering, unable to experience freedom from that suffering. But because our life is a little bit mixed with pleasure and suffering, we've got just the right amount of suffering. We can bear it, and we can experience some release from that suffering. We can experience a little bit of change. And being reborn in the human realm, we're very fortunate because we don't have too much suffering, like the kind of suffering you have in the hell realms or in the ghost realms. But we don't have too much pleasure, the kind of existence you might have in the heavenly realms, where you might forget the truths of impermanence or not self and end up reborn somewhere else. So as a human, we're very fortunate. We have this right amount of suffering and the right amount of opportunity to be free from suffering. And yet, most of us, maybe all of us, we haven't yet taken that opportunity for freedom. We've kept going round and round and round and round in this realm of samsara. And so this is a very depressing thought, right? This is an incredible sadness. When we think about the Buddha's enlightenment, in those few moments before he became enlightened, he saw very clearly. He saw his rebirths going back. Rebirth without beginning. He saw, in the next moment, the cause of rebirth in different places. So these are two of the three te-vidyas, the so-called enlightenment knowledges. And the third was, of course, the knowledge that he had destroyed the asavas, that he had destroyed the cankers, as they're sometimes called in English. And he had knowledge and vision of his release from that process that keeps us trapped in samsara. But before he got to that freedom, can you imagine how it would be to look back at all of the suffering that you've had, not just in this life, but in all of your different lives? Can you imagine the profound depth and the strength of mind that the Buddha must have had to endure that? When I think about it, I'm not sure that I could bear it. Even the idea of wandering about in samsara is, like I said, it's pretty depressing. But it's also something that's so horrible to contemplate. The Buddha said that our rebirth is just like a stick being thrown in the air. Sometimes it will land this way, sometimes it will land that way. And he said that the amount of rebirths that we've had, the bones from our body would be bigger than the tallest mountain. And so this is what it means to have rebirth. And so when we get a little glimpse of this reality of suffering, just a little glimpse, it should be enough, yeah, to make us think twice about wanting to come back. But the Buddha said, you know, when he told the story about this mountain of bones, or when he said that there's an ocean of blood, or when he said that the amount of tears that you've shed for suffering in past lives is larger than the ocean. When he told these things, he didn't just do it to horrify us. He didn't do it for shock value. He said, so long you have wandered in samsara, fettered by ignorance, a slave to craving, long enough to become dispassionate, disillusioned with samsara. And so therefore, he says, strive and wake up to the truths. Wake up and work towards an escape. So we're very lucky that we've heard the Dhamma. Sometimes when I think about how fortunate I am, I get really tearful. I grew up in the suburbs of Sydney, a white boy in the suburbs, and when I heard the Dhamma for the first time, I couldn't believe that there was this profound wisdom that was available to me. Perhaps some of you were born into Buddhism and you had access from a very early age. But these teachings are so precious. So when I think, what does it take to get to enlightenment? The first thing it takes is that a Buddha arises in the world. Because I don't know about you, but I would not have discovered this for myself. I needed someone to show me. I needed someone to tell me. Perhaps it's the same with you. And so what it takes is for someone, such as the Buddha, to wake up to the truth of suffering in the way that Shakyamuni Buddha did. Woke up, saw through the suffering. Saw through the suffering to an escape from that suffering. And so we need the Buddha to arise in the world. Imagine all of those countless lives that we've lived in the past as all sorts of beings in all sorts of places, and how many times we missed the teachings of the Buddha. How many times? And so how precious it is in this life that we have access to those teachings. And so the Buddha arises in this world and discovers for himself those teachings, attains enlightenment for himself. And then there's a choice that the Buddha has to make. He could either just stay quiet and be a Pacceka Buddha, not tell anyone, not teach. And so if that happened, again, we'd miss out on the teachings. But he didn't stay silent. We know the story about the Brahma Sahampati who came and asked the Buddha to teach out of compassion. And the Buddha looked and saw, yes, there are beings with little dust in their eyes, little dust, and who are capable of understanding the teachings. And so out of compassion, the Buddha taught. And so we are those beings with little dust in our eyes. Isn't that comforting? Isn't that reassuring? Because sometimes you might feel rather dusty. You might feel that you're incapable of understanding this deep Dharma. But you should know that the very fact that you're here, the very fact that you've taken time out of your busy life to be here tonight, shows that you understand enough. You understand enough. You understand where happiness lies. You understand what you need to do to increase your happiness and to decrease your suffering. You've understood. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. How wonderful, how amazing, how close you are to Nibbana. Right? Closer than many others will ever be. How fortunate for you to have heard the Dhamma. There's so many beings, even now, when Dhamma is so well known, millions, billions of beings around the world who have not investigated the Dhamma, have not developed their mind, who've never practiced meditation, never seen the potential for the mind to come out of suffering, and who just bounce around from one horrible event to the next, never gaining any wisdom. And so we're so lucky. Sometimes it's easy to forget how fortunate we are. Sometimes it's easy to forget the wisdom that we should have. But we are making progress, you and me. We are. Little by little by little. We are making progress. And so the Buddha arises in the world and teaches the Dhamma that is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end, and complete and pure. And someone comes along and hears the teaching, and they develop a little bit of faith in that teaching. And so they listen more, and understanding, they practice. And with perseverance, the Buddha says, they arrive at the final goal. So it feels like there's a little bit missing, right, from the middle. You hear the teaching, persevere, practice, they arrive at the final goal. If only it was that simple and quick, yeah? But the Buddha didn't say that it would happen overnight. The Buddha frequently stated that this is a gradual process. Attaining enlightenment is a gradual process. He likens it to the gradual slope of the ocean floor. He says the ocean floor does not suddenly drop off. The ocean floor, when you walk from the beach, imagine you had very heavy shoes and maybe a long snorkel. You walk and the ocean gradually slopes, gradually inclines. And he said this is how it is for the process of enlightenment. It's a gradual process, a gradual purification of the mind, a gradual abandoning of the defilements. And this morning, many of you were here this morning when I asked, thinking about this with the rain, when did you get wet walking in the rain? Was it the first drop? Or was it when you were completely saturated? When do you get wet? Was it somewhere in between? And so the Buddha also used an analogy of rain on a mountaintop. That when it rains, drop by drop, the little cracks in the earth fill up. Those cracks fill up the creeks. Those little creeks fill up the rivers. That fills up the lakes. That fills up, they spill over into the larger rivers, and those large rivers go all the way to the ocean, filling up the ocean. And it's a beautiful image. Every single drop of water mattered, right? You couldn't have done that without every drop of water being important. And it's the same for us in our spiritual practice. Every practice of meditation, every opportunity to make merit, every kind word that we say, this all adds up. This all matters. Our life is not a dress rehearsal for enlightenment. The things that we do matter. And so every drop of goodness matters. Every drop of wisdom that we gain helps to fill up those creeks, those rivers, those lakes, those giant rivers that lead to the ocean. And that ocean is, of course, that is a simile for an ocean of wisdom, for Nibbana. And this drops of rain is a simile for our good practices that fill up those vessels of water, bodies of water. But it's gradual, which is good, right? Because it's much better to be gradual and see it happening little by little than to give up expecting it will be easy, right? It's not easy to control your mind. It's not easy to sit for an hour. It's not easy to maintain the 5 precepts. It's not easy to be kind, generous to others. So much more difficult to gain the kind of liberating wisdom that will really help us make progress on this spiritual path. And so that's why we're encouraged on this long, gradual process, this long, gradual path, to aim towards something that's going to help us, and that is stream entry. As we said this morning, stream entry is seeing through Sakkaya Ditthi, this sense of embodied self. So we do this by contemplating things like anicca, anatta. We understand why this is dukkha. We're encouraged to remove doubt. We want to understand more and more what the truth is, get this experiential conviction, saddha, this faith, a conviction in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. That's why we practice in this way, always chanting the Buddha-nussati, Dhamma-nussati, Sangha-nussati. We're trying to encourage that confidence to grow. And when we start to see in this way, we understand the importance of our practice in developing our ethical conduct, generosity, in developing all the factors of the Eightfold Noble Path. And we stop believing in pointless rites and rituals. And so these are the three things abandoned by the stream enterer: Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikicca, doubt, and Silabhata Paramasa, the reliance upon rituals and rites. So this is where our effort is aimed, right? Maybe, some of us, at least trying for the lowest rung on the Enlightenment stages. And so this is also not easy to do. To see through the self is not easy. We're so conditioned to believe so strongly in this me, my, I, mine, myself. All those lives that we've lived, that's what we've done. We've had this strong sense of self. We've had craving for future rebirth. We've had hunger for more and more things. And so this is why we are stuck. This is the habit pattern of our mind. It's not easy to break this habit pattern. And so it's not easy to attain stream entry. I wish it was. I wish I could sit here and say, all you have to do is these three things. It's simple, just like that. And so sometimes when I'm talking to people about the difficulty of attaining enlightenment, it sounds like a real party pooper. People want to hear it's easy. If only it was easy, yeah? An analogy that I've come up with over time is the analogy of going to the moon. So, to get to the moon, all of the energy, most of the energy, nearly all the energy, is getting that rocket up into above the atmosphere, above Earth orbit, right? We need all that power from the rocket going up into space. So you might think, well, that's like the effort required to get to stream entry. That's a lot of effort. But once you get out of the pull of the Earth's gravity, it becomes much easier to get to the moon. When you attain stream entry, you're on your way. No more than 7 rebirths. And you're free. The momentum of your practice is such that it's impossible to fall back. That momentum is very important to understand. How do we get such a momentum in our practice? Well, we need to develop good qualities here and now in our life so that our mind inclines more and more and more towards the kind of qualities that are associated with Nibbana. We're not going to be able to incline the mind that way if we keep on going that way, right? If we keep on going towards unwholesome states, unwholesome qualities, unwholesome actions, and all of that. So that momentum is really important. We want to develop that momentum as much as we can in our life. And so the rocket gets up into space, and then it's just a little bit of a push to take it in the direction of the moon. So the once returner still has quite a lot of defilements, which is something I find quite reassuring, actually. You know, the stream enterer and the once returner, they still have sense desire. You know, they still have ill will. It goes to show just how persistent these defilements are. That even someone who is cusped into the Enlightenment stages still has these tendencies. The stream enterer still has sense desire. The stream enterer still has ill will. The once returner slackens these things. The non-returner abandons them. You might think of that non-returner like landing down on the moon. And the Arahant abandons the 5 higher fetters. The desire for rebirth in the form realm, the desire for rebirth in the immaterial realm, conceit or pride, arrogance, restlessness, wanting to do something else, wanting maybe another life perhaps, another something to do, anything to do, any kind of existence. And the last one is ignorance. So that also gives me a little bit of hope. Ignorance is not fully abandoned until the Arahant stage. And that Arahant would be like stepping out onto the surface of the moon. The job done. And the Arahant always says, their cry is, no more rebirth. I've done what was meant to be done. I've lived the holy life. There is no more rebirth. And so that process of going from Earth to the moon is not easy, right? The process of attaining stream entry itself is not easy, let alone walking on the moon. And then I think about me, and I think I'm still reading the instructions to make my spaceship. You know, I haven't really, I mean, I've started building it a little bit, but it's like one of those IKEA shelves. You know, you need to really understand how these things go together. But I feel so lucky because at least I've got the instructions. At least I've made a start on my rocket ship. And I won't get up into space unless I read the instructions and start building, right? And it's the same for all of us. It's no good if we just listen to the teachings but never practice. It's no good if we practice but don't listen to the teachings. And this is something I see in Australia, people practicing meditation but they're not interested in hearing about ethics or generosity or karma or rebirth. And so they practice meditation but they don't listen to the teachings. Many people don't listen to the teachings or practice meditation. And so those people will not be able to make progress on the spiritual path. They're going to remain in samsara. And so we need some sort of energy behind us, some sort of effort in our spiritual practice. And so one way of thinking about this is that concept of samvega, this spiritual urgency, this spiritual emergency, this emotion of wanting to be free from samsara. And so whilst this is a gradual process, we need to start making effort, right? Whilst it's gradual, we still need some urgency, if that makes sense. So how should we practice? Where should we put this urgency? One of my favourite suttas is not rocket science, it's about a farmer. And even farming is quite a complicated profession, right? You know, we say, oh, it's not rocket science, people think farming's quite easy, but actually farming's quite difficult. And the Buddha said that the farmer has 3 urgent duties to do. 3 urgent duties. The first is to prepare the soil. You know, you have to till the soil, remove the rocks, make sure there's no dinosaur bones or roots or things that can stop the plants to grow. So you need to prepare the soil. It's a really important part of being a farmer. And the next thing you need to do is plant the seed at the right time, right? In the right way. And after that, you need to water that seed at the right time, in the right way. And the Buddha said, even though the farmer has done these 3 urgent duties, that farmer cannot make the crop grow like that, cannot say when it will ripen, when the crop will be ready for harvesting. And so in the same way, the Buddha says that we have 3 urgent duties too. The first is to practice adisila sikha, the training in higher ethics. So we need to develop our sila. We need to develop our ethical conduct. This is like us preparing the soil. We need to prepare the ground. This is the most basic thing. And for so many people, for so many Buddhists, practicing ethical behaviour is difficult. It takes a little bit of effort, yeah, to maintain the precepts purely. And even if we can maintain the precepts easily, it can become a habit after some time. We still need to develop our ethical conduct in other ways, to deepen it, to be more reflective of it, to understand why it is important, not just to tick it off the list of things that we do as Buddhists. Take 5 precepts, manage to keep them, very good. You know, the Buddha said a baby can keep the 5 precepts. But we want to become more reflective. We want to understand why ethical conduct is so important. Why does it matter so much? It's the ground out of which all our spiritual practice will grow. And so this is what we need to do. We need to prepare the ground, always making sure that we're observing the precepts, not killing, not stealing, especially no sexual misconduct, but especially with speech. Because I think for most Buddhists, the first 3 are pretty easy to do. The 5th precept, abstaining from alcohol, many people will struggle with that in many places. But the first 3 are pretty easy, you have to try hard, but speech is one of those ones that's so difficult. And actually probably the source of most of the suffering in our life is, you know, words that we've said that have hurt others words that have hurt us, dividing people from each other, people lying to us or us lying. You know, these are the kind of things that cause us a lot of suffering. So speech is something that's really important and very powerful. We don't really reflect upon it enough, I think, in Buddhism, in Buddhist circles. Anyway, so we've got to prepare the ground. And the reason for that is when it comes to do things like meditation, our ethical conduct, and especially speech, is the things that reverberate around our minds, right? You sit down, you're like, oh, she said that to me, I'll tell her later on. Or how dare they do that to me, I'm going to tell, I'm going to show them, I'm going to tell on so-and-so to them, I'm going to destroy their happiness. So we have these things that pop up in our mind, and it shows that we still haven't developed our ethical conduct. So that's why it's really important to become blameless, to have the bliss of blamelessness, the anavajja sukha, the bliss of being blameless. And this is when we develop our ethical conduct in a wonderful way. You feel so good about yourself. I haven't said anything, I haven't hurt anyone. You sit down to meditate, and very quickly the mind just drops into a very peaceful place. This is one reason that ethical conduct is important. And so, we develop the soil, we prepare the soil. Then, we plant the seed. And that is what I just spoke about. Mental development, bhavana, adicitta sikha. Adicitta sikha. Developing the higher mind, training in the higher mind. And so this is what we learn in our meditation practice. Actually, there is a higher mind. You see that, don't you, when you meditate? You see glimpses of a mind that's so different from your daily mind. You see the potential in your mind. You see what it feels like when there are no defilements in your mind, even just for a few moments of peace, when the hindrances are very low, a few moments. You see, oh, it's so beautiful. It's like a clean floor. You know when you've just cleaned the floor at home, and then maybe you're doing a bit of cooking and something drops on the floor? You can't stand it. You have to pick it up, right? The floor is so clean and beautiful. You know, if the floor is really messy and something falls on the floor, it doesn't matter, right? But when you've started to see the potential for purifying your mind, when you've had that experience in your meditation of peace, contentment, it's so beautiful. You don't want to muck it up again. You don't want anything to destroy that pristine purity. And so this meditation is like the seed. Developing the mind is like the seed. It requires the soil to grow. If we don't have ethical conduct, the seed can't flourish. And so this is why we train the mind. We train the mind to grow like that seed. And then the seed needs help. It needs some water. So the farmer has to irrigate the seed from time to time. In the same way, the Buddha said we need to develop adipanya sikha, the training in higher wisdom. Wisdom is what will help the seed grow. We need that wisdom, that water on the seed. Otherwise the seed can't flourish. And the wisdom is hearing the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma, pondering the Dhamma, removing doubt, asking questions, having conversations about the Dhamma. In this way we develop our wisdom. When we see for ourselves, when we experience something for ourselves, that's the kind of wisdom we really want. That's the kind of wisdom that's going to completely change our mind. That's the kind of wisdom that's really going to help that plant to grow higher, And sometimes perhaps you've seen this in your own meditation practice, in your own spiritual practice, where you've seen something for yourself, you understand. You never forget that, right? And this helps you grow. You're not going back. When you see something like that for yourself, that helps to build the faith, the conviction that we need in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. That conviction in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, coupled with ethics, is the 4 factors of stream entry. This is what a stream enterer has. They have complete confidence and conviction in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, in the Sangha, and they understand the importance of ethical conduct. They're not going to make a mistake. They're not going to backslide. So this is the 4 factors of stream entry. But even when we practice well, preparing the ground, our ethical conduct, planting that seed, developing the mind, getting some wisdom, watering it with teachings and listening to the Dhamma, learning for ourselves. Even when we do that, just like that farmer who can't say grow and ripen at this time, we can't force enlightenment to happen. We can't. If only, right? Have a nice meditation. Now I'm going to get enlightened in the next one. No, it doesn't work like that. These things happen according to nature. It's according to causes and conditions that the crops ripen at a certain time. So we can't force it. It doesn't mean that we should stop working towards that goal. It just means that we can't make these things happen. We can't crave for enlightenment. But what we can do is incline the mind over and over again towards the kind of wholesome states and wholesome qualities that push the mind further and further and further in that direction. Take something like ethical conduct. The Buddha said when he was asked about ethical conduct and if good ethical conduct leads to things like good rebirths, and he said, well, imagine a tree that's sloping to the west, inclining to the west. If you were to cut down that tree, which way would it fall? Well, it would fall to the west. In the same way, if we practice good ethical conduct, if we practice mental conduct of developing the mind and develop wisdom, then we're on our way. We're inclining in that direction. And so that's likely the way that we'll fall, right? And so we need this patience. It's a gradual path. We need this urgency to stimulate us to keep practicing. We need confidence and faith in the Buddha's teachings. And perhaps we need to have confidence in ourselves, in our ability to attain enlightenment. And that's where a lot of people really struggle. We don't have this confidence. One thing that might help you is to remember that the Buddha did. The Buddha had confidence in you, in people like us. The Buddha had confidence in beings like us with little dust in our eyes, or a lot. He had confidence that we would understand the teachings. And so if you're ever struggling in your practice, remember that. The Buddha taught out of compassion for people like you. So I've been talking for a little while. I've got no idea what the time is. 9:22. So I think I might wrap it up there and invite any questions. And actually, I'll share. Can I share one more sutta that just came into my mind? Sometimes things will pop into my head, and I think, oh, I should talk about that because it could be significant. So, been talking about Nibbana, right? Been talking about what it takes to get there. And some of the things I've been talking about maybe have been a little bit practical, but mostly they've been a bit profound, a bit maybe something that feels very diffuse, not very useful. But the sutta that just popped into my head is from the Anguttara Nikaya, from the Anguttara Nikaya 5s, and it's called the Opportunities for Freedom. So opportunities for vimutti. Vimutti, of course, is a synonym for nibbana, freedom. And so he said, the Buddha said that there's these 5 opportunities for freedom. And this is all very practical. So hopefully it will help you. And tomorrow, actually, I'll be looking in more detail at the kind of things that we need to do, the meditation practices that we need to do to work towards enlightenment. Especially, I'll be looking at the 4 right efforts. And so that's something that isn't often well taught, I've found. So maybe tomorrow we'll give it a go. Perhaps you could tell me if it's well taught or not. And 4 right efforts tomorrow is, and we'll be looking at the bojjhangas as well, the enlightenment factors. So anyway, 5 opportunities for freedom that are practical. The Buddha said that there are these 5 opportunities. The first opportunity for freedom is when you hear the Dhamma, when you listen to a teaching of the Dhamma. This is an opportunity for freedom. Right? This is the rain on the mountaintop. When you hear the Dhamma, when you read the suttas, this is an opportunity for us. If we take it, really take it. And so many times in the suttas we see people attaining enlightenment just by listening to the teaching. Obviously, their mind was already prepared, right? And then it was just that one drop that took them over the edge and turned them into an ocean. So we have this opportunity when we listen to the Dhamma. So never just kind of turn up kind of like, oh, I better go to that Dhamma talk, or never read the suttas thinking, oh, I should. Always remember that this is an opportunity for wisdom and, as the Buddha said, an opportunity for freedom. So that's a good thing to know. That's the first one. The second opportunity for freedom is teaching the Dhamma. And so you might think, oh, well, I can't do that, I'm just lay. But you teach the Dhamma all the time, right? Our parents are our first Dhamma teachers. We share the Dhamma with our friends. We engage in conversations with each other about the Dhamma. We have so much potential to help others through our understanding of the Dhamma. When we do a little bit of teaching, we have to know a little bit of our stuff, right? Need to feel confident that you've got something worth sharing. And so in this way we want to feel comfortable that we've got some sort of mastery over a little bit. We know, oh, this is what the 4 Noble Truths mean. We know, oh, these are the 5 hindrances. We understand it, so then we can share it with someone else. And as we share, we actually have this opportunity for freedom, because the path comes alive inside you. You're sharing this beautiful thing. You are participating in the rolling of that Dharma wheel that started with the Buddha 2,600 years ago. You're part of this ongoing process, sharing the Dharma. You don't have to be a monk or a nun. You don't have to have an international teaching career. You just have to be able to help someone at the right time, in the right way. Yeah? So teaching the Dhamma is an opportunity for freedom. The third opportunity is reciting the Dhamma. So, like I mentioned this morning, don't just do it by rote or ritual. Every time you chant the Namo Tassa, the Itipiso, this is an opportunity for freedom. Chanting is such a powerful way of making the Dhamma come alive to us in that moment. We recite the Dhamma, it goes deeper inside of us. I don't know if you've heard about Dhamma Ruwan, the young boy who's 2 years old in Sri Lanka who started chanting the Dhamma, and he would chant for like half an hour. He would chant the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he would chant the Ratana Sutta, and he was so young, right? And sometimes I try to learn all my chanting. I try to learn so much, you know. It's a real slog, especially as you get older. And I think, why am I doing this? I just get hit by a car tomorrow and I'll never get to use it. But perhaps it's not the right way to think about it. Maybe the chanting that we do, if we remember it really well, can help us in future rebirths. And perhaps, I mean, I'm just speculating here, but someone like Dhamma Ruwan, a little boy who was never instructed in chanting, never instructed in the Dhamma, just started spontaneously chanting. Perhaps he was up in some heaven realm, chanting away. He could remember it. Or perhaps he was a monk in a previous life and learnt the Dhamma, and it helped him in this life. So chanting is never wasted, is what I'm trying to say. But when we chant, we should know the meaning of the words. It's not just noise. It's not just sounds. We want to engage with the meaning of the words. Sometimes it's worth slowing down. Sometimes it's worth reading it in your native language, becoming familiar again and again and again with the meaning of these words, so that when you're chanting, it can come alive in you. And I've experienced such joy and waves of piti and bliss from chanting. It's a very powerful practice, putting these words out into the world. So this is an opportunity also for freedom. It's also the way that we learn the Dhamma. So it's really a way that we synthesize our knowledge. The fourth way that we can get an opportunity for freedom is by pondering the Dhamma. So that means it's okay to think about the Dhamma. We need to actually think about the Dhamma. And one of the great tragedies is that for some reason many meditation teachers and schools have decided that you're not allowed to think and really frown upon thinking or intellectualizing. But actually, this is the way that we make sense of what we've heard. We ponder it, we think over it. Take something like that meditation that I taught today, the Anussati of peace and stilling, Upasamanussati. When we think about these qualities, it helps us understand what Nibbana would be like. It helps us understand, what would lead to more peace? What leads away from peace? What is it like to end craving? How can I look at craving in my life? We ponder, we think about these things, and it's very useful. I don't think we do enough. Give yourself some time at the beginning of your meditation practice to do some thinking. Work with that busy thinking mind that you've brought with you from the outside world. onto the cushion. Allow yourself a few minutes to think about something wholesome at least, and then let it go. Or after you've done some meditation, read a sutta, short sutta. Ponder it, think about it. How can I apply this in my life? This is how we make progress on the path. So take the time to ponder. And actually, in our busy world with our busy phones, pondering has become something we don't really do a lot of. We don't give ourselves the time to luxuriate in allowing our mind to wander around a theme, to allow the mind to think about it from some different angles and see how it might apply to us in our life. So pondering is the fourth opportunity for freedom. The fifth and last is taking a theme, a subject for meditation. So that would be something that we've heard, listened to the Dhamma, and we've heard a theme, or something that we've taught, something that we've recited, something that we've pondered, becomes a meditation theme. Something like impermanence, or something like generosity, or the recollection of Nibbana. This is a theme that we take into our meditation practice, and that theme deepens and deepens and deepens. That subject of meditation deepens and deepens, and that, of course, will become an opportunity for freedom too. So these are 5 opportunities for vimutti, for Nibbana: listening to the Dhamma, teaching the Dhamma, reciting the Dhamma, pondering the Dhamma, and using the Dhamma as a theme for meditation, for samadhi. And so these are practical ways that we can use the teaching. And remember again that analogy of the rain, wisdom, hearing the teachings falling on the mountaintop, and how every time we ponder, we think, we recite, we meditate, we're raining on that mountaintop. And all rivers go down the mountain, all rivers lead to the sea, lead to the ocean. And so we should have confidence that we are on the way, that our mind is inclined, that we are gradually sloping towards Nibbana. So it's a talk about how to get, what it takes to get to Nibbana, and I hope that it will be of some benefit to you. And we still have time for some questions. If you'd like to ask any questions, please feel free.